I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear
I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
Hello, cabinet members. It's me, the President's Guy, teaching you the history of the American presidents one video at a time. Today we have a very special list that I'm sure you're going to love. We've done presidential scandals, presidential tier lists, and we've ranked election results. But today, I want to talk about the special women in the lives of the American presidents, and no, I'm not talking about the first ladies. I'm talking about their mistresses, the women that were in their heads and in their beds. Now, many historians stay away from this topic, but it's incredibly important. Some of these women changed the course of American history and were iconic figures in their own right. None other than Benjamin Franklin himself said that choosing the right mistress was critically important for any ambitious politician, and that is obviously true. The job of president represents ultimate power, which is the ultimate aphrodisiac. This power comes with almost unlimited temptation, and while some presidents like Washington and Lincoln were strong enough to resist that temptation, many others were not. Today we're going to rank the top 10 most iconic mistresses of American presidents and see which ones were the most beautiful, the most intelligent, the most seductive, and the most famous. Let's get started. Starting with number 10, we have a true war hero, Captain Kathleen Summersby, known as Kay for short. Kay was the daughter of British Lieutenant Colonel Donald MacArthur, and she certainly inherited his courage and patriotism. When World War II began, even though women were banned from fighting on the Allied side, Kay bravely signed up to serve in the Mechanized Transport Corps of the English Army in order to transport soldiers around the country and help the war effort against Nazi Germany. She served throughout the war and was decorated for her excellent service. However, her life changed forever when she was assigned to drive General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of all Allied forces in Europe, in May 1942. She got along well with Eisenhower as they were both tough, but had a shared sense of humor. Kay became Eisenhower's most trusted confidant, driving him around Britain and listening to his troubles during the darkest days of the Second World War. Eventually, their friendship began to blossom into romance. Both of them were married, but sometimes war makes people do strange things. Summersby was married to a British officer named Gordon Thomas Summersby, and Dwight was married to future First Lady Mamie Eisenhower, but he couldn't resist the beautiful and formidable Captain Summersby. They kept their love a secret even after the war, and Eisenhower returned to his wife and budding political career in the United States, eventually being elected president in 1952. The two never saw one another again. According to the author Merle Miller, President Harry S. Truman told him that Eisenhower asked his superior, General George Marshall, for permission to divorce his wife and marry Captain Summersby, but that permission was denied. Whether this is true or not, we will never know. At number 9, we have the famous congresswoman and trailblazing feminist Helen Douglas. Helen Gahagan was born in 1900 to Walter Gahagan, a rich businessman who owned a construction company in Boonton, New Jersey, and his wife, a school teacher. From an early age, she dreamed of being an actress, and after attending Columbia University, her striking beauty and genius-level intelligence got her many roles on Broadway, and as an opera singer, touring Europe to great critical acclaim. She then began starring in movies, most famously 1935's She, in which she played the villain. She married fellow actor Melvyn Douglas in 1931, although their marriage was marred by infidelity on both sides. Helen was a lifetime liberal and motivated by her hatred for the fascism taking over Europe in the 30s. She ran for Congress and served as one of the first women to serve in the House of Representatives, representing California's 14th District. While in Congress, Douglas was an active member of the political left, advocating for civic freedoms, workers' right to unionize, and minority rights. She was also entangled in a passionate love affair with Texas Senator Lyndon B. Johnson. Johnson was a pupil of deceased President Franklin D. Roosevelt and another liberal who advocated for welfare policies. The two bonded over their shared ideals and their pure animal attraction to one another. Johnson found Gahagan's intelligence and beauty irresistible, and she felt the same about his rugged masculinity and massive frame. According to Johnson's biographer, Robert Caro, the pair flaunted their affair, and it was an open secret all around Capitol Hill, to the extreme annoyance of both of their spouses. Their affair came to an end when Helen was defeated in her bid for the Senate seat in California in 1950 by future President Richard Nixon. Despite this setback, she was a heroic feminist figure, serving 3 full terms in the House of Representatives and fighting for her beliefs at a time when it was shocking for a woman to do so. She was an inspiring trailblazer, never giving up on the causes she believed in, even after leaving Congress. Coming in at number 8, Rarely has a president actually admitted to having an affair with one of these women, but in January 1998, President Bill Clinton admitted under oath that he had been unfaithful to his wife and the glamorous star, Miss Jennifer Flowers. She was originally born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in 1950. From an early age, she was popular due to her striking blonde beauty and her warm and inviting personality, earning the adorable nickname Buffles from her schoolmates. Flowers later moved to Arkansas and was one of the most famous women in the state, working as an actress, a model, singer, and eventually as a TV reporter, covering various stories around the state. It was in this line of work that she met future President Bill Clinton, who was then the governor of the state of Arkansas. According to her, Clinton helped her get a job with the state at the Arkansas Appeal Tribunal, which helped them carry on their romantic relationship. According to Jennifer, that relationship lasted a shocking 12 years under the nose of future First Lady Hillary Clinton. During this time, Clinton was alleged to have sexual affairs with many other women aside from Miss Flowers. During the 1992 presidential election, which brought Governor Clinton to the White House, Miss Clinton came forward and admitted to the affair with the American press, offering up tapes which she said were of herself and Clinton discussing their affair. Several sources, including Clinton advisor James Carville, alleged that these tapes were doctored or entirely false. Flowers became a major celebrity in her own right throughout the Clinton administration of the 90s. She went on programs like The Richard Bay Show and The Howard Stern Show to discuss her involvement with the president. She published a memoir and stated in movies. She also appeared at WrestleMania 14 to serve as a ring announcer and ran a cabaret club in the French Quarter of New Orleans. In 1998, while defending himself from rape accusations from another woman, President Bill Clinton testified under oath about his involvement with Jennifer Flowers, although he claimed that their relationship consisted of only one encounter, which occurred in 1977. We may never know the whole truth about these events. Miss Flowers is still active on social media, having supported the presidential campaign of President Donald Trump in 2016. Coming in at number 7, Lucy Mercer was born in 1891 to Caro Mercer, an officer who had served Theodore Roosevelt in the Rough Riders unit in Cuba. She was a free-spirited and rambunctious like her father, and struck out on her own to work in a dress shop as a young woman. Through her father's connections with Theodore Roosevelt, Lucy was chosen to become the Social Security Secretary of his favorite niece, future First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, planning her calendar for her and making sure she kept up with her busy schedule as a philanthropist and charity worker. The two were polar opposites. Lucy was refined and beautiful, but shallow and selfish. Eleanor was considered quite homely and awkward for a woman of her elevated social status, but was empathetic and concerned with helping others, especially those less fortunate than herself. Despite these differences, the two formed a bond and were a productive team. This all came to an end when Eleanor discovered to her horror and shock that Lucy had been having a sexual affair with her husband Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the future 32nd President of the United States. At the time, Roosevelt was a rising progressive politician, just like his cousin Theodore, and was serving as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy in the wartime cabinet of President Woodrow Wilson during the First World War. He had not yet suffered the bout of polio which would render him disabled, so their affair occurred in the full flower of his youth and vigor. Although Lucy was not yet married like some of the other women on this list, the affair was scandalous, in part because Roosevelt and Eleanor already had several children with more on the way. This affair was a permanent stain on the marriage between Franklin and Eleanor, and although they stayed together and eventually made it all the way to the White House, things between them were never quite the same. Although they promised Eleanor they would stop seeing each other, Lucy quit her job working for Eleanor and enlisted in the women's section of the United States Navy, being assigned to work directly for FDR, or under him as the need arose. This was a well-known piece of gossip around the high circles of Washington, D.C., humiliating Eleanor. When Franklin went on a trip to Europe to work toward victory in the war, Eleanor discovered Lucy's love letters to Franklin and gave him an ultimatum: drop Lucy or get a divorce. Franklin's rich mother threatened to cut him off completely if he divorced Eleanor, so he was forced to break off his affair with Lucy Mercer. Eventually, she married the American socialite Winthrop Rutherford and became a mother, staying away from politics for the rest of her life. Coming in at number 6. Of all the women on this list, perhaps none are as controversial as Stormy Daniels. The longtime porn star born Stephanie Daniels, before adopting the stage name Stormy, she grew up in a low-income household in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She had to fight and scrape to rise from poverty, seeking any path to get ahead. She had worked as a porn star, porn director, and stripper, having won many awards and being inducted into the AVN Hall of Fame, the XRCO Hall of Fame, and the Vanity Fair Hall of Fame for such classic films as Full Disclosure, Camp Cuddly Pines, and The Power Tool Massacre. Her personal life has been relatively unstable, including 4 husbands and 3 divorces before the relatively young age of 45. Daniels was apparently always interested in politics, serving as a spokeswoman for the adult industry and making a chaotic failed campaign to challenge Louisiana Senator David Vitter in the Republican primaries of 2010. All this changed in 2016 during the campaign of future President Donald J. Trump. During the campaign, Daniels came forward and alleged that years earlier, Trump had an affair with her while his wife Melania was pregnant with their only child. According to Daniels, she met Trump at the 2006 American Century Celebrity Golf Tournament in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, and had sex during the weekend. She stated that Trump discussed inviting her to appear on a later season of The Apprentice, although this never materialized. Trump's campaign denied the affair ever occurred, and his lawyers accused her of lying. Trump's attorney paid Daniels $100,000 in the final days before the 2016 vote, which many commenters have speculated was hush money to keep her quiet until after the election. However, this strategy blew up in the face of Trump and his lawyer Michael Cohen as the payment became public and the former faced criminal charges over his conduct. Trump has sued Daniels and she has sued him back, and the entire situation has been the subject of ongoing litigation for nearly a decade. The truth of what happened may never be known. Coming in at number 5, perhaps no woman has ever been more associated with the role of presidential mistress than this woman, but for years there has been debate about whether she ever was an actual mistress or just a victim of abuse of presidential power. Either way, the life of Monica Lewinsky changed American culture and American history forever. Born to a wealthy Jewish family in San Francisco in 1973, Lewinsky grew up amongst the elite in Bel Air, California. Lewinsky's father was an oncologist and her mother was a successful writer. This privileged background included an education at expensive private schools like John Thomas Dye School and Bel Air Prep. From an early age, Lewinsky was engaged in risky romantic relationships with older men in positions of authority. She had an affair with a 40-year-old man in LA when she was just 18 years old, and later went on to date her former high school drama instructor, who was married at the time. Lewinsky graduated from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, with a bachelor's degree in psychology in the spring of 1995. That summer, Lewinsky used her elite family connections to get a highly competitive unpaid internship working in the White House 3 years into the administration of Democratic President Bill Clinton. At the White House, Lewinsky worked directly with the president and began spending so much time with him that her superiors transferred her to working in the Defense Department because of the strange closeness between the two. Lewinsky would later state that during her time working for Bill Clinton, she had had 9 romantic encounters with him in the Oval Office, which famously included oral sex but not full intercourse. Lewinsky told her friend and fellow government employee Linda Tripp about the affair, and Tripp recorded a number of phone conversations between the two women on the subject of Clinton and Lewinsky's relationship with him.
We didn't have sex, Linda.
Well, what do you call it?
We fooled around.
She later turned the tape recordings to the attorney Ken Starr, who was serving as the special prosecutor into Clinton's alleged fraud in the famous Whitewater case. After receiving the tapes, Starr widened his prosecution of Clinton into a wider probe of misconduct of government officials. Eventually, Clinton was impeached on a charge of perjury and very nearly removed from office. The Lewinsky scandal devoured the second half of Clinton's presidency and has permanently changed his legacy, tying it forever to the name Monica Lewinsky. In recent years, Lewinsky has emerged from decades as the butt of the jokes and become a minor feminist icon, discussing the harassment of women in the workplace and the ways that men in authority have historically abused their power. She even has created her own very successful fashion brand. Her comeback as a businesswoman and public intellectual proves that any person can overcome difficult circumstances and use their experiences to improve the world, assuming they have as much courage as Monica. Coming in at number 4, one of the most infamous campaign slogans in American history is the taunt from the 1884 presidential election, "Mama, where's my pa?" which was used by supporters of the Republican candidate Governor Grover Cleveland of New York by the supporters of his Democratic opponent, Senator James Bland of Maine. This fierce struggle between titans devolved from discussions of issues like tariffs and inflation to schoolyard taunts and mudslinging of serious accusations. Blaine was being hit hard on the basis of his alleged corruption, being accused of selling his vote in Congress for hard cash. In order to respond, he sent detectives to upstate New York to bring up a scandal which had been buried to this point. Maria Crofts Halpin had had a son with Grover Cleveland before being put into a mental facility. Halpin was a notorious woman about the town when Cleveland was a young bachelor. She was accused of having slept with a number of Cleveland's friends, but claimed that her son was Cleveland's, even in the face of public accusations by the Cleveland campaign that she was lying about paternity. Despite his denials, Halpin always maintained that her child belonged to Cleveland, much to his public annoyance. Cleveland won the campaign anyway and gave the original taunt a new ending. When Democrats called out, "Mama, where's my pa?" Republicans would now responded, "Gone to the White House, ha ha ha." While the truth of Halpin's story will never be known, her huge impact on presidential politics easily earns her a place on this list. Coming in at number 3. Of the women on this list, Mimi Alford is not the most famous or the most beautiful or the most historically significant. However, in terms of pure debauchery and hedonism, Mimi Alford's experiences in the Kennedy White House surpass any other woman on this list and easily earn her a place on it. Born in 1943 and raised in Connecticut, Alford was much like Monica Lewinsky in that she was a young woman seduced by a charismatic Democratic president. During her first year at Wheaton College, Mimi was offered a job as a summer intern for the summer of 1962. The very first week she started, Mimi was invited to spend a time with the president of a private White House cocktail party. According to Mimi, after the party, she was given a personal tour of the White House residence by President John F. Kennedy. And during that tour, he took her virginity in the First Lady's personal bathroom. This first encounter set the twisted and disturbing tone for the rest of her relationship with Kennedy. For the next 18 months, Kennedy slept with Mimi and was, according to her, cruel and abusive, insisting on sleeping with her despite the fact that she had entered a relationship with a man her own age and was eventually engaged to him. Despite that, Kennedy continued to have his way with and became cold and dismissive, humiliating her in front of others. The affair ended when Kennedy's son died in 1963, changing the entire emotional landscape of the Camelot White House. Alfred's relationship with Kennedy was largely a secret from the American public for decades, until she dramatically revealed in a 2001 tell-all memoir, which was a bestseller. Coming in at number 2, the second to last entry on this list is a woman who was a trailblazer in terms of crafting her own narrative. Unlike past alleged mistresses like Maria Crofts Halpin, Nan Britain told her own story and shaped her own legacy. Born in 1896 to a respected local physician and his wife, Britain was a native of Marion, Ohio, the old stomping grounds of future President Warren G. Harding. Harding's sister was Britain's high school English teacher at a time when the future president was lighting up the Ohio political scene with his famous charisma, charm, and wit. This connection led young Nan Britain to form an obsessive fixation on the handsome older man, which was so serious that her doctor father spoke to Harding and asked him to let her down gently. Harding tried to do this, telling her that she would someday meet the man of her dreams and that this man would be much closer to her own age. However, this lecture was ineffective and Nan was able to eventually seduce him with her youthful good looks and luscious gold curls. She began an affair with Harding the next year at the beginning of World War I in 1914 and continued to sleep with him for the next 9 years until his death in 1923. This was despite the fact that Harding had both a wife and another mistress, all of whom he was able to juggle with his irresistible charisma. While Harding was a relatively bad president plagued with scandals like Teapot Dome, his death sent shockwaves throughout the country and ensured that his memory would have resonance for the rest of the century, especially among his fellow Republicans. Following his death, Britain broke ranks with all her predecessors and was the first presidential mistress in American history to write a detailed tell-all memoir about her passionate, decade-long affair with a sitting governor and then American president. While this was shocking in its own right, Britain alleged in the pages of her smash hit book that she and Harding had actually conceived a child, a daughter, which gave her memoir its title, The President's Daughter. This revelation was especially shocking because Harding had had no legitimate children with his wife Florence, or any offspring with any other women, meaning that Britain's daughter, Elizabeth Ann, would be the only child of a mourned American president if her mother was in fact telling the truth. From the outset, Florence Harding disputed the paternity of Nan Britain's daughter and refused to pay the child support promised by Warren Harding before his death. This case was a famous controversy until 2015, when Elizabeth Ann's paternity and Nan Britain's honesty were vindicated by a posthumous DNA test. Of all the women on this list, Britain was probably the one best able to use her connection with the president to benefit herself without being consumed by the consequences of it. Her books sold very well, and Britain used the proceeds to create an independent life for herself and for her daughter, shaping her own destiny and blazing a trail. Alright, cabinet members, we're approaching the end of the list, and I'm sure you can already guess who number 1 is, and I'm very excited to talk about that woman. But before we do, if you enjoyed this video, were entertained by it, or if you feel smarter, do yourself and your friends a favor and share it around, like, comment, please subscribe to the channel. I love American presidential history, and I love that we can be on this journey together. Now with all that out of the way, let's get down to number 1. The number 1 presidential mistress in all of American history, drum roll please, Marilyn Monroe. Number 1 on our list is without question the most famous woman, the most beautiful, and the one with the greatest lasting impact on American culture. While he was president, John F. Kennedy had a revolving harem of mistresses who ranged from famous actresses like Marlene Dietrich to young interns like Mimi Alford, who we covered earlier. But none could ever surpass the greatest leading lady of American history, Marilyn Monroe herself. Born Norma Jean Mortensen and a true native of LA, born at the Los Angeles General Hospital on June 1st, 1926. Her early life was troubled and chaotic as her mother switched partners constantly, meaning the man listed on her birth certificate may not even have been her actual father. Marilyn grew up surrounded by violence and addiction and moved from home to home, spending time in an orphanage. Young Marilyn was even allegedly molested on several occasions as a child, according to a recent biographer. According to Monroe, her childhood suffering led her to want to become an actress in order to escape her dark world into a safer and more joyous one in her imagination. Once she changed her stage name to Marilyn Monroe and was discovered by agents, she was an instant success, booking work as a model and screen actress due to her glamorous beauty and irresistible charm. Throughout her frenzied life, Marilyn starred in dozens of hit films and was the first ever nude model in a Playboy magazine. She also married 3 times, including a marriage to world-famous Yankee star Joe DiMaggio. However, her most famous romantic relationship must surely be her legendary tryst with President John F. Kennedy. According to Marilyn's biographer James Spada, she was introduced to JFK by the actor Peter Lawford when he was just the junior senator from Massachusetts in 1954. However, Kennedy was an up-and-coming political star on the moderate left as both a war hero and the oldest remaining brother of one of the nation's richest families. Kennedy's famous good looks and charms won Marilyn over, and the two began sleeping together. The chronology of their relationship is difficult to establish, so it's not entirely clear when the two began their affair, but it seems very likely that it began when Kennedy was a senator and lasted into his time in the White House. Kennedy, like his father and brothers, grew up expecting to have short, casual affairs with many women, as opposed to deeper relationships with fewer women. Kennedy expected the same thing with Marilyn and appears to have tried his best to keep her own expectations low and keep their relationship secret from the public and from his own wife. However, Marilyn appears to have become increasingly attached to the elegant politician and made several attempts to deepen the relationship and threatened to expose it to the public. The final straw appears to have been the famous clip of Marilyn signing "Happy Birthday" to President Kennedy in 1962 in a sultry voice. This event immediately created gossip about the two and convinced Kennedy he had to end his relationship with Marilyn in order to protect his administration and his re-election chances. Eventually, Kennedy broke off the relationship entirely and refused to answer or return Marilyn's repeated calls to the White House switchboard. His brother Robert, serving as Attorney General in the cabinet, was sent to inform Marilyn of the end of the affair and to convince her to be silent over it. Many sources have debated whether the end of her affair with Kennedy contributed to her death of an overdose of barbiturates in 1962. We will probably never know. But what we know for certain is that at 36 years old, Marilyn was far too young to leave this world. Marilyn's story is an iconic American symbol for a reason. She embodied the live fast, die young ethos that describes so much of our culture. Like so many women on our list, her history was ultimately a tragic one, which could very likely have been prevented. This fact alone gives us all pause. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. A little different than the normal content I usually produce here. A little longer and more detailed than normal, involving tons of research. If you want to see more content like this from me, such as top murders committed by presidents, top richest presidents, make sure to let me know your feelings in the comments down below. Thank you for joining me on another episode of our adventures through American history, and until next time, remember, never stop learning.